it's not just what you know about your bloodlines, but the things you don't know that I think is the most scary.
Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Catch Podcast. We're here for another Ruth. Well, actually, this is the conclusion of the whole matter of the chapter of Ruth 4. Yeah.
Really?
So, yes, it is. Only 4 chapters, David.
Yes.
So we are here to dive deep. And I think we're going to really dive deep on this one because, this is, we serve a God that he's the author and the finisher of our faith.
Yes.
And we see how God was able to orchestrate every single thing in Ruth's life to where it was the way that it was. And so I think the main concept in terms of Ruth 4 that really stood out to me was redemption. Like, we serve a God that can redeem our past, our bloodlines, anything in your life that you feel like you need redeeming of or you need recovering of, God is able to redeem it and restore it.
Okay.
And so we see in this chapter, not only does God redeem Ruth, but he redeems the others around her, like Naomi and Boaz, because I think in Ruth, because, this is a whole thing. Because, of course, I don't know if anybody has read it, but, of course, Ruth marries Boaz. Mm-hmm. And so they have a son named Obed. And Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David.
Yes.
So, but it says, I think it's in verse 17, it says, and the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi. And I thought that was very interesting because being that it's Ruth's child, why would they say it's born to Naomi? And so you see in this story, not only does God tie in Ruth's story, but he ties in Naomi's story along with it. And that's just very powerful and impacting to me. I don't know why I say powerful. But to get on this subject, there is a question I wanted to ask you. There are so many questions that I wanted to go with this, but I had to, dial it down to 3. So you're about to get some 3 hard questions. Are you ready?
I hope so.
All righty. So as we reflect over Ruth's life, she wasn't always with Naomi. She was a Moabitess. She was a Moabitess princess. Her father was King Eglon. And so it wasn't like she didn't come from anything. Like before Naomi, she was pretty living a lavish lifestyle.
Pretty much.
So, and her whole line and her whole family were probably in paganism. So I want to ask you, what about Christianity do you think attracted Ruth from coming from a line of paganism to cause to convert to Christianity?
That's a good question. In that particular time, Christianity wasn't really a thing, but like, for instance, Abraham's faith was counted unto him as righteousness.
Right. So,
to be completely honest with you, that's one of the most challenging things that we always blame Orpah for, turning around and going back. Mm-hmm. And rightfully so, but, it's not written where Naomi, showed Ruth the God of the Bible or the God of their religion or the God of their nationality, in a sense. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So one of the questions I always had, what made Ruth follow her the way she followed her? It's one thing if she was I'll just, be nice. It was my husband's mom. So it's I'll stick around to help her, sympathy. But it was not that. It was complete submission.
Yeah.
We know without any promise of natural things. But honestly, I think it was just a tie to Naomi. And I think the thing that is really impressive with Ruth is that although she didn't understand, we know she had to have, at some point, I'm sure Naomi told her something about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But I'm sure there was a lot that Ruth did not understand. And I'm sure she had tons of reasons, like Orpah, to turn around and go back. But the thing that's impressive is her faithfulness just to be faithful. I'm sure there was things like I said, there was reasons, it's her husband's mom. But I think she was just being faithful to someone she trusted. And I think sometimes it becomes that simple where it's like you don't understand, you don't see the way. Naomi says she's going back to her land, and Ruth has never been there. She doesn't know what that's going to mean for her. She's a foreigner, all those things. I think she was just being faithful to someone she trusted, even if she didn't understand all that who she trusted was doing.
That's a true point. I would say for me, I think it was maybe because again, like I said in the beginning, like it's not like she didn't come from anything. So it's not like she was like, oh, well, I had nothing to lose. No, she had everything to lose.
Literally,
like she had a wealth to lose. She had any other, and so I would say, I don't know. I think maybe it was her example, like maybe Naomi's example, maybe the examples that she's seen from that Jewish culture. And I think Hadassah or Vinny either said this, like, I think episodes back when they were talking about like what is following. And Vinny made a good point that I constantly think about, because I was like, yeah, like, especially coming from something so pagan and so self-centered. Like, it's always about you. But when it comes to Christianity, it's just so family-oriented to the point where it's just like there is something so powerful and so connected about it that it draws you in, right? There was something, I don't want to say there was something that she was running away from, but she knew there was something not to go back to, because something that she would go back to didn't bring as much peace as if she were to go with Naomi. So I think even in like a modern day sense, like there is just a certain peace that you feel when you're in this religion, when you're in this, when you're in Christianity, and when you're doing it for real. Like, not the type of, oh, I'm going to just carry the name, not live the life. I'm talking about when you really live this thing for real, it brings about a certain peace. It brings about a certain guidance. It brings about a certain love that you have never seen or experienced or heard before. And I know you mentioned Abraham. He even came from, I would even say he even came from a line of like paganism, like not even hearing or seeing or even like.
I never thought of that before.
Like he never seen, like he didn't have a Bible like we have a Bible today. So
not only that, but he was the very first.
Literally,
that God started.
The first started the whole Hebrew nation with him, and yet he was attracted to God, and that's what blows my mind to this day. So, again, basing off of the line of paganism, in that like God can redeem bloodlines, He can redeem your past. And I think everybody hear the phrase generational curses, and
true. Like
whether you're a non-believer or a believer or not, I think everybody has heard the term generational curse. And again, for anybody who doesn't know what it is, it's basically just trying to break the pattern from which you've seen your loved ones or your uncle, your aunts, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, because we serve a God of generations. And so I really want to ask you the question, like, based off Ruth coming from a line of, paganism, and then also if we're going to dig deep into Boaz, not only did she have her own generational curses that she had to face, I think she also had to deal with Boaz's generational curses, because if we look at the generation and lineage of Boaz, his father was Salmon, and Salmon married Rahab, and Rahab was a harlot, and of course she's the one who hid the 2 spies of Israel. So it's not like, but it begs the question, like, what was Rahab's situation to where she got into prostitution? And so not only was Ruth marrying into Boaz's bloodline, but they were marrying each other. So it's like you both have to break the generational curses together.
True.
And so I really want to ask you the question, like, what can you tell someone in terms of trying to break a generational curse?
Okay, so 2 things I was thinking of while you were speaking. One was when you were saying what Ruth was leaving to what she was going to.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's important to cut your losses, even if you don't all the way see where the gains are coming from next.
Yeah.
But you know what is a loss, right? You know what wasn't good, or you know you don't want to go back to what was. Even if you don't have all the answers for where you're going, just cutting what's bad, I think, was one thing that Ruth was really impressive about Ruth, and that she made a good decision about. With the bloodlines, one thing that is really, I think sometimes people don't mention, it's not just what you know about your bloodlines, but the things you don't know that I think is the most scary.
Oh, yeah.
And for us, like you say, a lot of people say generational curses. You can know a lot of generational curses in your family. You can. Three things. You can know a lot of them. You can know some of them and not know some other ones. And then the scary one is like, I think some people don't know it until it happens. And then they realize then that they continued it.
Right.
But they weren't trying to, but it was kind of just like, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I would say it's never too late to break that pattern, because as we see from Ruth's life, God is able to turn generational curses into generational blessings.
1,000%.
When God seen Ruth, he's seen a king. He's seen King David. And literally from King David's lineage, Jesus Christ would be in that same lineage.
Exactly.
So it's never impossible for God to like break a generational curse. Now, I would say it will only take God and God alone.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people think that they can do it on their own when in actuality, you really can't.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That is one of the most, for me, that is one of the most like prevailing reasons why I stick with God. And there's, of course, tons of other reasons. But not knowing things or this life, like nothing in this life is guaranteed. Like even Paul said, if we only have hope in this life, we're all men most miserable.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how people can live in a life where nothing is guaranteed, anything can happen on a day-to-day basis, and they don't have any security.
Yeah. Ooh.
Like they don't have, and we don't have control over our lives, even though we're in God, but he does, and we can trust that he does. And that provides security, not only for the things we know, like the generational curses we're aware of, but the things that we don't know. And I think some people, I don't know. I think it's kind of like pride in a sense that it's almost like masked as ignorance, because it's like, dude, come on. Nobody can know. There's nothing in this life that you can control. So for you to act like you don't need the one who is in control of it all, it's like, come on. Come on, man.
Yeah, because our bishop says this all the time. He says, not only can God forgive your sins, but he can give you a satisfying life. Like, yes, it's important to have your soul saved. 100%. Number one, your soul needs to be saved. Mm-hmm. But the thing about God is he will give you a life that is worth living. And that's that's how you know what Ruth went through. That's how you know the blessing that God gave her was from God. Because again, like I said, it didn't just touch her. It touched the people around her.
True.
It touched Naomi. It touched Boaz. And so with that being the case, it's able to touch the generations that would come after her. And so,
True. But the thing with that also, though, is Ruth had to trust God before she got it.
Yeah.
Now, per se, if Orpah would have knew what would have happened to Ruth, I'm sure she would have been like, oh, bet, let me go with Naomi.
Right.
But that's not how God does it.
Right.
He wants you to trust him first. And like I say, it goes back to that pride.
Yeah.
You got to give up wanting to control what you feel is yours, because our life isn't ours. But what you feel is yours, to give it up to God for what he has in store. Because that's another thing. It's like, man, what would have happened to Orpah?
Literally.
Like, if Ruth did it that way and she's in the lineage of Christ, it's like, whoa. Like, just imagine the other side of what Orpah could have done. Now, we did some research. Orpah ended up being in the lineage of Goliath. Yeah. So we saw how it turned out. But it's interesting to think about, like, man, if she would have, but it takes trust to get there.
Right. Like, you have to have those walk on water type of moments. But I know it's time for us to wrap up, but I want to ask you, almost.
We have a couple more minutes.
Okay, good. I want to ask you this last question. I feel like I have to phrase it in a different way, a certain way.
Uh-oh.
Because our bishop, normally with our church, we get together on Thursdays and we pray. Mm-hmm. And he gives us a word from the Lord. Mm-hmm. And from this particular one, he was talking about Ruth and Naomi. And he was saying on what if Ruth would have went back, like after everything that's happened, after the victory is won, right?
Mm-hmm.
After the story is finished, what if she went back to that same road to where she had to make the decision, like,
man,
should I go with Naomi or should I go with Orpah? And so I really want to ask you the question. If you were to put yourself in Ruth's shoes, coming across that same path to make that decision, what would you say? Like, what could you possibly say in this time of reflection of your life and everything that's happened? What would you say?
It's always tough when people are like, put yourself in their shoes, because it's like, man, it's impossible. I wasn't there. I believe I would have followed Naomi, but I think people make it sound easier than it was.
Yeah.
It's like Ruth chose to follow and Orpah did. It's like you said, when it's all said and done, going back to that road, because the decisions you make are going to live with you in more ways than. So we say like she had nothing to lose by going with Naomi. That's true, but she didn't know that when she was making the decision.
Literally.
Right? So it's like in that moment, it's tough.
It's like she had faith without even knowing she had faith, which is so like, God really has to keep you.
Yeah, that part. You just have to trust God in a way that is, I don't know. When you look back on it, it's going to be like, I don't know how it happened. I don't know this situation, whatever. You just have to trust him, because I can't put into words what made her do that.
Yeah.
Because she lost her husband. Her sister was going back. She didn't she didn't know how good it was going to be. Right? So it was complete faith.
But
and complete faith in Naomi as well. Yeah,
but I would say, like, if I were to put myself in Ruth's shoes, I think I would say, after all is said and done, after God has worked miracles, signs, and wonders in her life, I think I would say, this is the best decision of my life. And
1,000%.
Then 2, I have no regrets. Because I think, like you said, it's that uncertainty of knowing what is to come. Because sometimes when you have control on certain things, you feel like you have like a gauge point in terms of, I know this may happen, this may such and such.
Which is even
more.
But
she had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she had no idea what will come, what would go,
True.
What else more she would lose. Like, and I think Christians are very quick to view certain decisions like that as regrets, when in actuality, those are actually redirections. Like, the path that she was originally going on, sure, people might have been like, it's just safer to go with the known. But when it comes to God,
I see what you mean.
He is able to work on the unknown, that whatever you put your faith to, he'll elevate it. So it's like, I feel like when it came to her life, like, God really made it rich and added no sorrow.
Yeah. When we talk about regret, I think, like, for me, one of the main regrets I feel like I'd ever have, or I have had in the past, the only time I really regret something is when I didn't do it God's way. Yeah. Like, all the other times, even if, like, you struggled, but you were in the will of the Lord, there was a certain peace and there was a certain calm where you weren't worried. Yeah. And you didn't regret your decision, regardless of what anybody was saying or regardless of how people were looking at you. Only when it's like, and part of that is because our training. It's like, we know better. Yeah. But that's definitely been the only time I really regret stuff, is like when I moved too quick. Yeah, or I did something that I wasn't supposed to. Yeah, and which Christians should feel like that. It should never be like, if I would have went this path, I would have made more money, or I would have had a spouse by now, or I would have had that car by now. It's all deception. Right. So if you do it God's way is ultimately the best way. But when you do it God's way, he's the author and the finisher of our faith. God's way is the only way that's guaranteed too. Right. The only way. So they're telling us to wrap it up.
This is
Yeah,
I
I'm
literally
like,
seen
how
his
you feeling
hand.
these people? Bro.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
So
I
that's
don't-
the
I'm not paying
conclusion of
attention
the
to
whole matter of this whole entire Ruth series.
Mm.
I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all got something from it that maybe we may have missed. Tell us in the comments.
Yeah. And one thing we can learn from Ruth, don't be scared to do something that is unorthodox to what you've been doing.
Yeah.
Or that is considered like crazy by other people. Honestly, it's a great example that it does pay off.
Yes, it does. So, are we on one accord with our catchphrase at the end?
Catch
That's
you-
all right.
Wait, catch you later.
So, yes.
Okay, yes.
So, we will
We will catch you on the next
later.
wave.